I think we'll move on now, and I will introduce the next speaker for the Northeast panel. The next speaker is Courtney Schmidt. Courtney is the staff scientist with the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program. She coordinates and collaborates with partners to build consensus and create collective action. Take it away, Courtney.
Let's come off mute. Let's make sure I can do this. Oh. All right. Can everyone see the presentation screen?
Yes.
Or the slides?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. Awesome. All right, so thank you, everyone. So what I'm going to do today is kind of put a little bit more of an umbrella. Oh, is mine still showing?
No, we just lost your slides.
Oh dear, never mind then. All right. All right, so we're gonna try this again. My apologies. Share the screen. All right. And then I gotta move you guys. And swap. Now we're good?
You're good.
Awesome. All right. So thank you. So what I'm going to do today is actually talk about the program that Tom previewed, which is RAMP, Restoration, Assessment, and Monitoring Program. Now, I'm giving this talk as part of the Estuary Program who administers this program, but really this entire group of people, there's about 45 people on this email list, are really the authors and the energy behind everything you're going to see. So it's really because of them and Caitlin and Tom and Wenley just steering the ship for all these years that we've come to this point. And so everyone here over the last 2 days, we've discussed the management problems of marshes. We have marsh degradation, we have human influences. And we all know the collective need to understand these threats, to explore how we adapt, how can we allow them to migrate, mitigation, and actually also creation of salt marshes in places that development has taken them away, and maybe we can put them back. But to do this effectively, what we found out is this coordinated effort was needed to reach beyond political boundaries, whether that's the town, county, or state level. And so how did RAMP start? Well, it started with a massive individual organizational efforts to assess salt marshes. Mostly Save the Bay led the way with a lot of this in the 90s and the 2000s. And, you know, Tom and Caitlin with both CRMC, so the Coastal Resources Management Council, Caitlin's previous life, and then Tom in his work with Save the Bay and now the Natural History Survey. So these efforts were largely separate while everyone was connected and everyone worked together. The fact that everyone was largely separate created a bit of a hiccup in how things could be efficient and effective. So these efforts are still ongoing, but what we've now done is try to dump everybody together to keep that coordination going. So what is RAMP? Well, this formalizes these decades-long cooperation between federal, state, local, nonprofit, academic groups. If you think, eat, breathe, love salt marshes, this is pretty much the group for you. It's a regional strategy. It developed from this need for a statewide coordination like Tom talked about, but a good chunk of our marshes cross state lines. And so this regional coordination can come in to kind of go across those geopolitical boundaries. We also want to standardize methodology. And so this way we're kind of all going down the same path at the same time, using the same methods. Continue prioritization. Where do we need to focus? And then finally, also developing this information exchange and curating and sharing data and making sure that we're kind of all knowing where everyone is. So the big question is, if this has been working for so long without the collaboration, why formalize it? Save the Bay was leading the way. These individual groups were doing great. This prioritization scheme was up and running on its own. But as we found out through the coastal wetlands strategy, really this systematic approach needed to happen. And as the groups are working together, it's coming together. But they also were realizing they needed a clearinghouse. So many partners out in the field, data was in so many different places that it'd be great if you could just go to one spot and get all the information you need rather than making 12 or 5, phone calls. And then with this collaboration, you could actually go towards funding because you could figure out next projects. You can put the structure to it and really make better cases for funding. And then this also minimizes wetlands loss at the end of the day. This required and requires still a dedicated program with full-time equivalents to make it work efficiently. I'm going to put that pin right here. Currently, it's on the way to that framework. It has not been formalized in terms of writing into people's job descriptions. And that's a big next step that I'm going to talk about. Okay, so I realized I talked through all of this, gave you a setup, and never really told you where this can be impactful. And so the map on the right side of the screen is the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program study areas. It literally includes every chunk of water in the Narragansett Bay watershed, the coastal ponds that Caitlin talked about, those on the south coast of Rhode Island, and then Little Narragansett Bay, which is this tiny little bay between Westerly and Stonington, Connecticut. And so it's actually 3 states worth of saltwater. And while the focus is on Rhode Island, having the estuary program administer this allows us to amplify more work. It allows us to get across these state lines. And so it's multiple organizations and agencies working efficiently and collaboratively. So the idea here is not to supplant anything that's been done. It's to amplify partner work. It's to operationalize statewide and region-wide strategic planning. It's to implement these priority systems and to support funding seekers to meet needs. And so Caitlin has stepped up as the reserve manager of NIPNR to be the lead of this program, the chair of the program, and Tom seconds her on a lot of these things. And then Wenley also is a third in a lot. These are the 3 folks who really move this, but here we are at the estuary program, just kind of, making sure we get this all together. And so this is a list of our partners. Now, there's about 45 individuals across these organizations. We continue to grow. It's federal, local, academic, nonprofit, advocates. The idea here is to bridge the science and the managers, get everybody in the room talking through a lot of this stuff. Down to seeing a need and filling a need. So a lot of the needs identified were that top-down restoration coordination, monitoring and assessment capacity, not just funding, but people on the ground. Equipment inventory, can we share? Do we have to buy new stuff? Project management capacity, because again, we have some great people who are great on the ground, but as Caitlin showed how challenging some of these projects are, you need really strong project managers to come in. That centralized data management actually helps make sure that everybody understands what's going on at any one place. And then finally, that outreach capacity. As Caitlin also described, the idea of being able to get people on the ground, and the video was perfect to show Wenley using Save the Bay's volunteer network to get people on the ground and understanding how important these places were. And fill a need. Just because this is still not 100% formalized doesn't mean it's not working. Currently, there have been efficiencies and collaborations already in development because of this. One is we have a lot of folks who love and study the salt marsh, the salt marsh sparrow. And those folks are now working with the reserve to find more places to do more work. And that collaboration didn't happen before RAMP. The coordination across state agencies, we have a big group of people to talk to at any one point in time. And what's super important right now is the fact that we can be flexible to changing needs and funding regimes. And we can talk a bit about this new bipartisan infrastructure law, that this once in a generation funding came, and we had a group who was poised to take advantage of it. All right, so how does this all work? So first, the estuary program actually maintains a website for this group. We need to get it up and live, but what we do is we have Projects Hub. We can feature case studies and best practices on all the things that this group does: restoration, monitoring, assessment, land acquisition, the outreach, the tech transfer. We can create that clearinghouse so we can just store everything we need and keep building the information hub. And then finally, we have meetings. I mean, what's been super cool, while this whole group of people knew each other in person, have worked together for decades, RAMP as its own thing really got started inside the pandemic and then the remote world. And we have yet to have an in-person RAMP meeting, though these folks are meeting in person on sites all the time. So it'll be fun when we can get all those 45 people in the same room at the same time. So what makes this an effective program? Well, it's the commitment of, well, full-time equivalents. Right now we have commitment of a lot of people, but it's not fully written into their job descriptions. And so that needs to be important. But something like this needs facilitation. And so the SRA program, we set the table. In many ways, we don't have any stake in the game as long as it meets our mission, which it does. We can set the table and we can have these hard conversations that need to happen. We can build transparency and consensus information out. We can link to these regional efforts across the state, like we have members who are also part of Mass ECAN. We've worked with SMART teams, and many of our members are part of these, but we can kind of tap into that network of really super smart people. It also helps us, you know, to have effective meetings and debriefs and the ever important call for help. So when we allow people to come in and before the field season gets going really hard, you could say, hey, do you guys have extra interns or volunteers? I can use them. But the most important thing here is that it allows these super amazing on the ground groups to be on the ground and continue to be as effective as they are. All right, next up. Right now, we need to continue restoration, assessments, monitoring. We need to understand our new and emerging priorities. Every time we talk about Marsh RAM and we redo it, what does it mean? What are we seeing? Development, partnership development for funding and figuring out what our next steps will be and what this group should focus on next. What we need to do is finalize this framework with specific requests for people's job descriptions. Tom has a great draft. We just need to get that forward and approved by this group. In turn, that will also get us to get our website fully up and functional, which will put everything in one spot, and continue strategizing for new project ideas. We were able to have a super effective short notice meeting to talk about all this new funding coming down the pipeline, to talk about projects, capacity building, and even ideas for a workshop to kind of talk about all of this and share all the amazing data that's been collected over the years. And with the SRA program facilitating this, it enables this group to be ready with science-based plans and strategic planning, and know that we have a group ready to go. And it puts us hopefully ahead of the game in a lot of ways. And so the next important thing is to think through how we link these efforts to the community. And this is also going to link us to what Rachel Calabro will talk about next. And we've brought this up before in a lot of these talks when we talk through social metrics and economic metrics. But really there is this focus on environmental justice, and it's needed. And this is through our funding, federal funding. The BIL funding has this Justice 40 attached to it. And plus we have local initiatives that are saying we need to think through this. The SRA program can provide space and tools to have these challenging conversations, because we need not only to balance the wetlands needs, but the community needs at the same time. They could be one and the same, or they can be different. A wetland may need our attention that is not in an environmental justice area, or wetlands that are in environmental justice areas might need our attention. But this enables us to have these conversations. And I have to say that we are not the authority at all, but we're partnering with other organizations to create this space and these tools. So one thing we did was use EPA's Justice Screen to create our own region tool to portray and prioritize communities where the impact of environmental hazards could be intensified. And so this tool is completely designed for our partners and for people looking at projects. This is not really a community-based tool. You could put in your address, it can show where the communities are and what the demographics look like. And not only can this help prioritize project planning, but it also can tell you who you're dealing with, and maybe you might need to think your outreach strategy a bit differently depending on that community. So in short here, this tool is designed, we have nearly 75% of our communities. We have 113 communities in our study area. 75% of them have an environmental justice community inside of them, a priority area. So a lot of work we do is going to impact a lot of communities, and we need to think through that. So one thing is to talk about is what would the ideal be if we did this? Well, first we should have gotten organized first. These folks were organized, but I mean more like the ramp formalizing the program and writing the plans and then get to work. But you know what? Life doesn't happen that way. And these two cliches I think are perfect for this, but like perfect cannot be the enemy of good. We've done really great work in the past and it doesn't need to be perfect, but here we are now. And this is progress. It's never going to be perfect, but we have made so much progress as a region in the last 20 years in this front. And now we're even set to make more progress faster and more efficiently because of this collaboration. So last slide. This whole ramp effort is really standing on the shoulders of giants. We're only here now because of so much work that was done in the past and the super smarts of all these people to say, wow, we really need to coordinate. And so just if you take anything home, remember that this group unites organizations. We identify key priorities. We create and invigorate collaboration. We integrate with local regional partnerships and energize partners for funding and create partnership for funding. So with that, I will end. So.